It's sort of weird traveling around the country reading this book because in certain cities you know who they know, and other cities, so the kind of the gossip morphs. So just know that, so the poet in this section has just given, she keeps returning to being in her 20s, like each section she arrives in New York and has a different narrative kind of, but it's all kind of intertwined. So here she's doing her first big reading at St. Mark's Church, and so she reads with this guy, Joe Chiaravala, that's great, but basically the whole anxiety for her is not getting too loaded before the reading so that she doesn't succeed in reading. So she does her reading, and she reads first because she's the younger one, and then she sits down in kind of a pool of beer, and through the rest of the reading. So people start to come over to her. And I might have something for you, said Michael warmly. He was being Irish. Why don't you give me a little cheer? Michael Lally was a thin, handsome man. He had this poem called My Life. His poem was wide and tumbled through the various guises of him. Michael was straight. Michael was gay. John Ashbery called him a Francois Villon for our time, which got a lot of us reading him. Villon, not Michael. Michael we knew. He was bitter and he was kind. Michael was basically famous for being himself, which could be a thing, especially then. Later on, he went to Hollywood to be an actor. He wrote a lot of screenplays and wound up on Cagney and Lacey. That's what I heard because I didn't watch TV then. When I met him, he had lost a beautiful woman, South American, like an ambassador's daughter, because he wasn't rich, he told the younger guy poet. Now he was an editor at Franklin Mint. I think he liked me being gay, or at least was interested. We all knew each other then. Language poets knew Michael. He kind of was one then. That couldn't happen now. I went to his office at 43rd and Lex. A gig was a little thing he had for me. He didn't drink, and that was something too. He used to, he said. He sat in a blue shirt in front of a wall of dark books. He was the boss, and he slid a pamphlet at me. Then he put his arms behind himself like wings, his hands behind his head. Michael was good to watch because he was always acting. Some people are better in life than in film. Though I never saw him in film, so it might not be true. Nobody reads these books, he grinned. I shrugged. We could be snobs, but they like to own them. He turned around and drew one out. I was on Michael's show. Do you like Hart Crane? Yeah, I grunted. There was a Creeley poem that just ended Hart, so I knew I could love him. Michael opened the book, then flipping to the back, on its insides was a pamphlet for the person who doesn't read, explaining the poet's greatness. I got Hart. I covered his life, and amazingly, I got paid to read his poems. So this is kind of another version of the pamphlet. And I mentioned this, the great love of the lesbian section of this book is a poet named Rose, who is from Chicago, and so she gets alluded to here. Hart. It was a nice two-syllable name, Hart Crane, even one. He was the son of a candy maker, the one who invented lifesavers. Hart Crane drowned, so that was strange. I read everything Hart Crane wrote, which was only white buildings and the bridge, which I found a little impossible. And then the fat biography and his letters. I had never read anyone's letters before. I was 27. It was good being a journalist, or whatever I was now, because I could do all the reading that was too much in college, because now I was being paid to know. I could see in my reading that Hart was trying to write the great American long poem, and I think it was beyond him. Not because he wasn't great, but the long poem idea seems a little stretched thin, and who needs it, really? But Hart kept finding patrons and getting grants. He was like a comic ingenue. He winds up completely isolated on a tropical island in a hurricane, or else getting thrown out of Mexico on his Guggenheim. He was such a drunk. Meanwhile, he is writing the bridge. Why has nobody ever made this film? He was a very familiar man. I felt I knew him, a prematurely white-haired fag, shy-faced and handsome. Wearing one of those Russian sailor shirts, he was always leaning against a tree or posing in a group, Hart distractedly touching his own face. He seemed to be gazing into another world. That interested me. My father looked that way. I figured it meant you were gay. There's one picture of me when I was 13 sitting with my friends, and I was doing it, looking through the camera, back at myself, but pleased. Usually the other people on the picture actually seem to be in the world. They're stopping the balloon from floating off. He was the great poet of love. Hart produced in a flicker the blue veins he spied in a lover's breast. His twists of attention made your breath go still. To him, poetry was film, even lighter. Watching a man's hands grow not quite thingified, but resonant, meditative. You got there by looking long. All that looking compressed in a poem. He published his first in poetry, came to New York and got work in advertising through a friend of his dad's. And that young, 18 or 19, Hart was already a total drunk. At work, they gave him the perfume account because he was a poet, i.e. fag. leaving open vials on his desk to inspire the young homo who stumbled in sick in a dirty shirt and shoved the disgusting shit out the window by his desk, ending that. Hart published a poem called Chaplinesque, and then he and Charlie Chaplin went out on the town. Charlie didn't drink, but Hart must have been charming, not just terrible, and together they hit a bunch of parties in the village. Imagine some party where Hart Crane and Charlie Chaplin stroll in. I remember watching Allen Ginsberg and Robert Lowell talking one night at a party at Allen's. Lowell was scary. Manic eyes, big glasses, white shirt, of course. Allen wore a white shirt too, but Allen's was Buddhist. Lowell's took up more real space. At the reading, Gregory Corso yelled at Lowell, "You're talking to us like we're in school." Allen yelled back, "Shut up, Gregory." At a giant party in Tribeca, Robert De Niro was there. This is about 1982. He was wearing a beret and a plaid flannel shirt. He looked like all of us, only a little more deliberate. I was tripping my brains out. It was bright. I said, "Are you Robert De Niro, the actor?" He smiled sweetly, waiting. "I am Eileen Myles, the poet." His smile got even better, and about 1 million women swarmed him. When I toured with Jim Carroll, we didn't hang out, except one night we split a pint of ice cream in our hotel. That meant that Jim took a knife and cut the pint in half. And we each went back to our rooms, yelling down the hall about the night we split a pint in Milwaukee. I don't think he was supposed to become as steeped in your material as I did with Hart. I attached my homosexual poet to him and took a ride. Planes overhead, a train hurtling along its tracks. They had so much time back then, and they were meanwhile very interested in speed. They thought the future would be amazing, and it is, don't you think? I always think about a line Hart Crane wrote 2 different ways. The Bridge at Estadur is the poem the good version's in. It was definitely one of those back-of-the-book poems, really cranky. In many ways, Hart was like any weird guy, or the poem was what you'd find in anyone's notebook that was great. It was subtitled, An Impromptu Aesthetic Tirade. High on the bridge at Estadur, where no one has ever been before. A few lines below is the killer. But some are twisted by the love of things irreconcilable, the slant moon with the slanting hill. And then he follows up, gets all echoey and vatic. Oh, beauty's fool, though you have never seen them again, you won't forget. Twisted by the love of things irreconcilable. That was it. That was being gay for me. The slant moon with the slanting hill. The line just never undid itself. It's unbelievable. And every time it ripples in the exact same light, like the moon falling on those coats in the attic. The ocean not far away. You could hear it. Hart was haunted by the love of a remote, but certain resemblance you could not consume, but could only view. That got under my skin. I just sat at my typewriter and felt. I thought about Rose. "I'm your sister," she whispered. What did that mean? I didn't think incest was so bad. If you love somebody, she said, no. I flipped the pages. He liked sailors. To write the piece, I took a ton of amphetamine. I had a doctor in Queens, yet I was a drug coward, too afraid to go days on end. I'd go 3 or 4, live sleepless and sad, accomplishing rote kinds of work and bursts of energy, cleaning house. It was really ridiculous. The very thing I took it for, to write, was in fact entirely sabotaged by the drug. I was like a needle at the final cut of a record, just perched there, skipping. Time passed, yet time froze. I had already read everything by him and about him. I was full. And there I sat. Couldn't go out. Nope. I'd stay on the phone, sipping a beer at my desk or a cup of coffee. I am working. I'm doing my Franklin Furnace piece. What are you doing these days? I'm working freelance. Got a piece from Franklin Mint. Yep. I thought you said Franklin Furnace. Yep, I guess that's what I said, but that's not what I meant. Hart Crane's mother came to visit from Ohio, and she talked a little about staying in New York, which must have been scary. Grace Crane in New York. Uh-oh. Hart was her family name. He was Harold originally. That's who probably got the advertising job. C.A.'s son, Harold Crane. Why don't you call yourself Hart? Hart Crane sounds more like a real poet. Grace was smart. I bet it was her idea to put the Maxfield Parish in her husband's candy boxes. So the mother and son went shopping, got him socks and a winter coat, which he lost in the waterfront bars on the first cold night. They looked at those wan Preston Dickinsons at the Daniel Gallery on Madison, and then walked down Fifth Ave, still enjoying them, and later heard some music. It was just like in Cleveland. As a teenager, Hart went with Grace to hear Gertrude Stein. She went back to Ohio, and he took the Staten Island ferry with a couple of friends. He loved it out there, leaving the land, hovering in New York Harbor with the eerie, shimmering place with green Liberty holding the giant plane. It was a great day, and Hart was one of those kids everyone really loves. He was still really funny when he drank, and his friends all encouraged him. Hart was a genius. He wrote his mother staunchly about the trip. I have never felt as encouraged, as free, or as clean. Think of me often as such, or not at all, for I hope you will understand me.